Hi, what's up? I'm Channel Pup, the mascot for the level-headed fanboy. Welcome to another ranking video. This time we're going to be ranking every stage in Sonic Superstars. From worst to best. Sonic Superstars brought us a set of 11 new stages with the most inconsistent number of acts I've ever seen. So we're just going to be going through all 11 of them to determine which is the worst, which is the best, and everything in between. You know, how a ranking works, basically. Now, if you're new around these parts, I make a lot of Sonic videos. There is a venerable smorgasbord of Sonic content on my channel, so if you hit that subscribe button, you won't be disappointed. And if you are a little more familiar and you want to help support me further, the Patreon link is in the description below, and we'll go a little more into the perks of that at the very end of the video, as we always do. As for the ranking itself, do keep in mind that this is, at the end of the day, just my personal opinion. Nothing to get bent out of shape about. So if you do really vehemently disagree, I really urge you to make your own ranking video. It could be fun, it could be lucrative, and it's far more productive than yelling at me. But that ain't gonna stop you from doing so. So, hey. Alright, so in at number 11 is Golden Capital. And I just want to preface by saying, I don't think there's actually a bad zone in the set when it comes to Sonic Superstars, which is more than can be said for Sonic 1, 2, and CD. Alright, I didn't enjoy Sandopolis Act 2, so, I mean, Sonic 3 and Knuckles has kinda gotta go on the pile as well, I guess. But Golden Capital is by no means a bad zone. In fact, I think its theming, its overall aesthetic, is one of the better ones in the game. Most of the zones in Sonic Superstars, while they are original zones, they are also very much playing into the typical tropes of a Sonic level. All the archetypes are here. You can very much tell which prior Sonic zones inspired the selection that we have in Sonic Superstars, but Golden Capital is a bit of a different story. I suppose the best way I could describe Golden Capital from an aesthetic standpoint would be Mayan civilization but with bling. I mean, that's kinda neat, right? And of course, I gotta show some love to the fact that they incorporated early Sonic 1 concept art into the overall appearance of this zone. It is one of the best looking zones in the game. From a gameplay standpoint though, it's not one of the stronger ones. There are definitely elements here that I do really like. I like the fact that this one is another pinball stage, effectively. Complete with all the flippers and bumpers and what have you that you'd expect from a pinball stage. But this one isn't trying to look like a pinball stage. You don't have that typical casino or amusement park theming that you would get with this kind of level. You've even got anti-gravity gimmicks, which is rad. This stage is also great for farming rings, as there's lots of magnet shields around, as well as all kind of hidden nooks and crannies where you can gain additional rings. Man, if this is the worst zone in the game, this is pretty good. So what's the problem with Golden Capital then? What's letting this stage down? Well, there is some enemy placement of the, shall we say, metropolitan variety. Sonic fans will know what I mean by that. And this stage does go a lot harder with its pinball elements than Pinball Carnival did, to the point where, particularly in Act 2, those pinball elements can become kinda a roadblock. There are parts where it's such a tight squeeze, it's like, come on game, I just want to go home, man. There's also these drill sections which do nothing for me, but the absolute worst aspects of Golden Capital are all in Act 2. You've got these little auto-scrolling sections where you ride on a little turtle-themed platform and navigate your way through lava. Now okay, those are just a couple of quick stretches, not really enough to really detriment the level, but let's not forget, boss fights are a thing in this game. And that's where we come to the very reason why I always dread Golden Capital. The boss fight in Golden Capital Act 2 is one I really tried to give the benefit of the doubt. It's one that I really wanted to like, because this is Fang's big boss fight in the game. I love Fang the Hunter, and I was thrilled to see him back for Sonic Superstars, but this boss fight is not it. It looks cool, there's certainly spectacle there, but the problem is, the boss fights in Sonic Superstars are all a little bit more padded out this time. This one here is the most egregious of the bunch though, as you are given very slim opportunities to actually attack the guy, meaning that as it is, you can't take this boss fight really at your own pace, but then factor in the fact that it's an auto-scroller, and you can't spin dash or anything because you're on the platform. But okay, the boss fights, you can just cheese them by using the emerald abilities, right? No, you can't even go super here, even if you've earned all the emeralds, because at the start of the act, Fang takes all of your Chaos Emeralds. You know, those things you earned throughout the game. You cannot use them in one of the most obnoxiously long boss fights in the goddamn game. Alright, Sonic Superstars, I see how it is. Golden Capital is full of great ideas. It's easily the freshest stage in the game, but unfortunately this one goes just a bit overboard on the gimmicks to its own detriment. Also, before I forget, the music for this one is entirely of the sort of chiptune variety, which is a little disappointing, but hey, Act 2 actually is kind of a bop, so yeah. Give Act 2 a second chance. Short loop, but fantastic nonetheless. In at number 10 is Frozen Base. Frozen Base is there. You can just get through it, you know? I mean, to be fair, you could completely skip Act 1 when you're playing through this. And you wouldn't, truth be told, be missing all that much. There is snow, although it never really factors into the level design. It's really more of an aesthetic element. There are conveyor belts, and you can change their direction. And there are these little trapdoors that tilt, and that makes platforming kind of interesting. I'm kind of at a loss with this one. There's not much to say here. That said, one of the better parts of this act is in Act 1. A stage you're pretty unlikely to actually play on your first go-through. As the Nimbus from Futurama, the Egg Fortress rises from the ground. And the ground beneath you starts tumbling and you kind of have to catch up to it. That's all cool stuff. But again, you can just skip it in favor of playing through it as Tails, which is a unique stage, which is exclusively for Tails, and it really takes advantage of Tails' flight abilities. You have to use Tails' unique abilities to get through this one, and you don't often get stuff like that. And that is something I definitely appreciate about those character-specific stages. They are very outside the box. Then for Act 2, okay, so this is where it just turns into Fantasy Zone, basically. I say that like I've actually played Fantasy Zone. No, I heard someone else mention that it's like Fantasy Zone. I'm a Sonic fan, I only play Sonic games, guys. It is really funny to me how commonplace shooters are becoming in Sonic games. But, I'd be lying if I said this wasn't kind of fun. As like a replacement for the sort of Sky Chase transitionary take-a-breather stage, this is fun. Like, I think all Sonic games need that one-off stage where you just kind of take a breather and it's not overly challenging. It's where, like, Sonic 4 Episode 2 really missed the mark, was that sort of Sky Chase adjacent stage they gave you, which ended up being one of the most challenging stages in the game. That being said, I'd welcome this with even greater open arms were it not for the fact that we kind of fulfilled the Sky Chase quota in Golden Capital Act 2. But even then it was stressful. Like, the thing here isn't nix this, it's nix that. Nix the auto-scrollers from Golden Capital and keep this in there, and you've got a really solid pace breaker. Aesthetically, this stage is there, and overall gameplay, it's there. This is just a completely inoffensive stage. The music is a mixed bag. Act 1 sounds straight out of Sonic 4 Episode 2. The Tails Act music is actually a really solid recreation of that sort of Sega Mega Drive sound, and it sounds really, really good. And then, yeah, Act 2 has an accordingly very arcadey sort of sound to it as well. We're kind of, you know, out of the T-Lopes sections of this game as far as soundtrack goes. But aside from Act 1, which is admittedly a bit of an ear sore, there's nothing too terrible here music-wise. In at number 9 is Speed Jungle, which was probably one of the most marketed stages for this game, and I do get why, because it is just a perfectly middle-of-the-road stage. And there's really only one element here that kind of brings this one down a notch. In terms of the overall aesthetic of the stage, it's a jungle. There you go. You got a jungle stage. Not really anything to write home about any which way. It's just, it's kind of neat, I guess. Man, remember when the Mania team presented us with a printing press in the middle of a garden, absolutely covered in cherry blossoms? And now we have jungle. But okay, it's the level design that kind of makes this one tick, and of course the music. This stage has very strong tracks. Top to bottom, all acts, good tracks. Act 1 is solid. The main gimmicks being these little vines that you can bounce from, and these vines that you can grind on. You know, like in a modern Sonic game, except here it's a little less automated as you can stop yourself. You've also got these underground wooden burrows, which are very similar to Stardust Speedway in Sonic CD, in how you kind of have to pick a lane and you'll be bouncing from springs and making your way out. It's like a labyrinth of tubes. Just like every single Game Gear Sonic game. Okay, that's an exaggeration. This stage is not that tube heavy. But I can absolutely see why they call it Speed Jungle, because I guess like this, as far as like a second stage goes, is kind of comparable to kind of chemical plant, I guess, and that's very slopey. You got lots of chances to pick up speed, but then you've got some slightly more intricate platforming areas. I get the feeling that they were taking that kind of approach. The Sonic character-specific act is also really cool, with Fang chasing you through. And I have no idea why this wasn't mandatory, yet the Amy Fruit level was. I feel like the first encounter with Fang should surely be essential, right? Not to mention the fact that this is by far the most reasonable Fang encounter. But then there's Act 2, which is what brings this down a peg. You've got more gimmicks in Act 2. You've got the swinging poles, and that's pretty cool. Took me a minute to realize you just point yourself in the direction you want to go and then launch off. When I first played this, I was trying to time my jumps. When I figured it out, I was like, oh, that's convenient. It means you can speedrun it a lot easier. Okay, kudos to them for that. That's genuinely an improvement from the usual pole swinging. No, the bit that brings this down a peg is the darkness gimmick, and nobody likes darkness gimmicks in games, right? Remember Lost Labyrinth Act 2 from Sonic 4? Well, this isn't that bad at the very least. It's just a couple of seconds, but even then, I just can't help but think, wow, this really would be better if we didn't have the whole lights off gimmick, where you have just a tiny little window where you can see Sonic and the environment around him, meaning that certain traps can just kind of blindside you, which kind of just screams artificial difficulty. As far as this gimmick goes, it's done okay here. But I can't help but think how much better this would be if it weren't for that. Literally, just scrub that filter off of the screen, and look, it's better. On a whole though, Speed Jungle is fine. I think the theming could maybe be just a little bit more imaginative, and the darkness gimmick definitely lets the second act down. But on a whole, it's a fun one to explore, it's a fun one to breeze through, the Sonic act is really exciting and cinematic, shame about Fang's theme. It's a fine second level. In at number 8, we have Sand Sanctuary. A big old desert stage with sand. Sand you can sink in, sand waterfalls you can climb. Wait a minute, this sounds an awful lot like Sandopolis, doesn't it? Well, there are a few elements that save this one from just being a knockoff of Sandopolis. One being a massive snake that you get to run along the back of. And as he wiggles around, it means that if this snake is like a platform, it zigzags and it ramps up and down, and that's really cool. You can bounce off of his back, and you have to use this snake to kind of reach higher platforms. That's all really cool stuff. You've also got these conveyor belts too, and a lot of razor spikes. I guess a little more could have maybe been done with the snake though. I almost completely forgot this stage was even in the game. It's a good stage, but I think the original elements here are a little scarce, and they could have definitely done a bit more with what's new here. Also, the conveyor belts I can give or take. This one also has some fairly annoying enemy placement too, but one thing I sure as hell can't fault is the music. This one is a T-Lopes original, and it goes hard. In at number 7, we have Egg Fortress. Now, Egg Fortress, at a glance, is just your average Dr. Robotnik base. It's a floating thing in space, and Robotnik lives there, I guess, and it's got lots of enemies, and it's metallic, and it's full of traps. This is something we've all seen and done plenty of times before. And let's be real, the Egg Fortress is nowhere near as cool as the Death Egg or the Space Colony arc. Those are like the ultimate outer space Eggman things. It also doesn't have that foreboding atmosphere that we had with, say, Titanic Monarch from Sonic Mania. And there are a few instances where the crushing collision can really screw this up. Act 1 is a pretty run-off-the-mill Sonic final stage. It's your typical Robotnik base. Where this one gets a bit more interesting is Act 2. As the way you play Act 1, how long you spend in certain areas, or what enemies you fight, will influence how Act 2 will play out, which is really, really clever. Because in Act 2, not only are you running to the left, which feels really weird, and surprising that it took them this long to make a Sonic stage where you run to the left instead of the right, but everything is happening in reverse. Enemies you've defeated will respawn in. Their projectiles will move in the other direction, and platforms that would rise and fall are now moving in reverse. That is really, really cool. In the past, I kind of pondered whether or not it was kind of lazy to not actually make an Act 2, but instead just play Act 1 in reverse. At the same time, though, a lot of work must have gone into ensuring that this all works in reverse. And it's just a very unique gimmick. It's not one we've ever seen before. There are some areas that do let it down a little bit for me though, and those are like the anti-gravity laser field parts. Not only do they go on just a bit too long, but it also just completely cuts your entire pace. As you run into a room, stop, and the gravity's sucked out, and then you have to slowly maneuver your way through these lasers. Egg Fortress has a really cool gimmick. I just wish we had a more distinct location as opposed to Robotnik Base number 16. I get that a Robotnik base is gonna, be a Robotnik base. You're fighting against Robotnik, you're probably gonna fight him in his base at the very end. But I think other games have done a better job at making those Robotnik bases have a character of their own. Metallic Madness doesn't feel like Scrap Brain. Death Egg doesn't feel like Metallic Madness. Titanic Monarch doesn't feel like Death Egg. You get what I'm saying here. I think more could have been done to make this one visually interesting. Also, okay, the music. These tunes are good, but they're way too short. Act 2 does go kinda hard though. See, that's more what a Jun Senoi soundtrack should be. In at number 6 is Sky Temple, and this is where we're getting really, really good on this list now. Because I love Sky Temple. The theming of it, it's alright. It's a temple in the sky. Does what it says on the tin. But just the overall level design here is really, really good. This one probably makes some of the most use of the interactive foreground and background. But for a stage called Sky Temple, there's not a lot of bottomless pits or anything, not until like the very end, and even then they're very minimal. But this stage feels really, really big. There's so many different layers to it, so many different nooks and crannies to explore, so many hidden goodies. And then the gimmicks here are also really strong too. You've got the updrafts, which we're all pretty familiar with by now in Sonic games, but we've also got these little platforms that don't fully reveal themselves until you're actually standing on them. There's also the breakout sections, which are really inspired. But I think one of my favorite things about this stage is just how many big hills there are that you can just roll down. Sonic Superstars absolutely aced the joys of controlling classic Sonic, and Sky Temple is a brilliant stage to really get to grips with that because you've got so many ramps and hills and slopes. This is a fantastic stage. The music is also really nice. It's a good melody, it's a good composition, and what you have is kind of an interesting hybrid of kind of the sort of the chiptune-y sound combined with some more contemporary instrumentation as well. I believe this track was composed by Jun Senoi, and then Rintaro Soma went over a little bit, and you can kind of tell where his influence is. This is also a single act stage, so it is very densely packed, and it doesn't overstay its welcome either. So on a whole, yeah, Sky Temple, excellent. It says a lot about the better stages in this game that this one should come in at number 6, in the lower half of the list. In at number 5 is Bridge Island, the opening stage of the game. And Bridge Island is about as perfect of an opening stage for a Sonic game as you could ever ask for. It's just a really fun first impression of what this game has to offer. One of the things I adore about Bridge Island is just how layered and huge it feels when compared to stages like, say, Emerald Hill or Angel Island. There's a huge amount of breathing room here and a lot of verticality. You've got these little half pipes that you can run up and determine whether you take the higher path or the lower path. You've got cascading waterfalls that you can climb up to find goodies, which is great because otherwise the water power will be nigh on useless outside of Lagoon City. It also does just a really nice job at introducing the player to everything new that Sonic Superstars has to offer, including the playable background and foreground. The platforms are all nice and slopey, there's loads of hills, you can really pick up a lot of speed, particularly in Act 2. And I also love how the time of day changes from Act 1 to Act 2, with Act 2 being mostly in the sunset before the boss emerges at nighttime. The music is also really nice for this stage as well. While it does veer very close to being another Green Hill Zone in a lot of ways, I think Bridge Island does enough to set itself apart, and it's definitely one of my favorite opening stages in any of the 2D Sonic games. No, it's not the climactic story event that Angel Island was, but it's a damn fun level. In at number 4 is Pinball Carnival, which is funny because it is the 4th stage in the game as well. I don't really have a lot of complaints about Pinball Carnival. I think it is a damn near perfect stage. I mean, for one, when I first heard the name Pinball Carnival, I was like, okay, we're gonna get something like Carnival Night, right? We're gonna get the Sonic-forization of Carnival Night. But no, this looks nothing like Carnival Night or Casino Night or any of that. It's its own thing. It's actually a lot more carnival-y than Carnival Night. It feels a lot bigger though, and pinker. Until Act 2 anyways, when it gets greener and spooky. That was definitely a cool way to distinguish the two acts. Act 1 is very Carnival-esque with loads of clown paraphernalia around the place, and I really love this little token flip minigame where you can get extra rings. The roller coaster gimmicks? I think there's a few too many of them, if I'm being honest. This happens like, what, 4 times in Act 2? I could have just gone for 1. I think 1 would have been fine. And these are, of course, suspended above bottomless pits. But, I mean, at least it's not as bottomless pit heavy as, say, the Dimps Sonic games. I still think it would be really cool, though, if there were a more arduous lower path where you could just bypass these sections. I genuinely really enjoy this one, though. It's got a cool atmosphere, and it's an original spin on the typical sort of pinball level archetype. Also, all of the music here is done by Rintaro Soma, and he's really good. This is very quintessentially Sonic-sounding music. It absolutely slaps. Alright, before we get to the top 3, it's time for a quick wellness break from Coach Brett.
What's up, Coach Brett, interrupting your video to do some exercise. Today we're gonna do a split squat. So think regular squat, except you're gonna be driving one foot back. Make sure you're thinking train tracks, not tightrope. So nice, just about past shoulder width or so. I'm gonna drive straight down and straight back up. You don't wanna lean forward too much because then it becomes a lunge. You're not gonna really work it the same way. What I would recommend is about 10 to 20 reps. I'd say about 15 to 20 if it was me. And then do that for about 2 to 3 sets and you're good to go back to the video.
Hey there, Coach Brett here with True Capacity, your path to a healthier you. And at True Capacity, we've got programs tailored specifically for you. It's a bodyweight program that all you need is just your body weight, a little determination. We've got a minimal equipment program where you don't really need anything, just the essentials. And then we also have a full gym access program where really the only thing you need is a gym membership and you're good to go. So let's embark on this journey together and click the link down below for more details. Thanks guys, excited to see you in there.
In at number 3 is Lagoon City. Alright, I'm gonna start with the negative. It wishes it were Hydrocity. No, it's not as good as the GOAT, okay? Now that is a very high bar, but this is really trying. Particularly with the first act, which is full of water slides. Just like Hydro City. Except here on the water slides, you can't curl into a ball. So it's worse. Not to say it's bad though, I still enjoy a good water slide in a Sonic game and this is still a really fun stage. Act 1 is pretty short, all things considered, but that's okay because this is a mandatory 3-act stage. Act 1, very simple, you're above water for the majority of it. Very kinetic, very fast-paced, very reminiscent of Hydro City. I can't really fault it. The worst I can say about it is that it's not as cool as Hydro City. The second act is the Amy act. Now, I was initially feeling a little shortchanged by that first act. I was like, really? Is this stage gonna end that quick? But no, we got 2 massive acts after this. The Amy act is a nice mixture of platforming above and below the water. And there are these fruits in the way that can only be knocked out of the way by Amy's Pico Pico hammer. Now you can't just jump over these completely, but it is very satisfying to just slam these fruits. What is all this fruit doing here anyway? Also, if this is a fruity themed stage, why am I not playing as Sonic and Knuckles? You can tell me to stop making the joke all you want. Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. And then at the back end of Amy's act, you rescue Trip, which is interesting because it gives the player different physical properties, makes you a little heavier, but also it's plot sensitive, so you do get a little bit of backstory on Trip here, and oh, it's adorable. My heart is just melting looking at this. You weird anthro furry girls are adorable. Ugh, that's gonna get clipped, isn't it? And then for the third act, Act 2, yeah, makes a lot of sense that. This is where the more methodic platforming is, and they've brought back that little gimmick of where you're in the little bubble and then you can kind of just traverse the stage by floating around in there. If you do want to get through these areas a little bit quicker, you can try and be a bit of a jackass and do some really perilous platforming, or you can make good use of your water wisp. Sorry, did I say wisp? I meant emerald. Enemy placement is an absolute minefield, admittedly, but it does reward good maneuvers. There's also these little floral things that you can collect and get extra rings, which I think is a nice touch. Also, just gonna say, I think the bosses here are actually really solid too, especially if you use your emerald power-ups. In fact, only if you use your emerald power-ups. If you don't, then they're gonna take a while. I also really love the theming. It looks a lot like Jugpot Falls from Klonoa Daughter Phantomile, and that naturally makes me smile, and just like Klonoa Daughter Phantomile, you help a crying child. So that's kinda nice, right? Sonic Superstars Daughter Phantomile. Okay, that would be a masterpiece. I think this is a great game. I don't think it's Klonoa Daughter Phantomile great, but I think it's great. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the music, though. So Act 1's kind of neat. It's doing its best to kind of give a Hydro City kind of vibe, and I think the Act 1 is by Rintaro Soma. Once again, he understands the assignment, he gets it, he understands how Sonic music should sound. And the track for the Amy Act, not sure who composed that, but it's really nice, it fits the overall tone. It'd make a nice theme for classic Amy. But then look. If Rintaro Soma was absolutely proving his chops with classic Sonic music, T-Loops comes back in to remind us how it is with Act 2. Because Lagoon City Act 2 is the best music track in the entire game, and one of the best classic Sonic music tracks. It is such a vibe. It pulls us back to that sort of New Jack Swing sound, very atmospheric. Nectar to the ears, I tell ya. In at number 2, this one is going to be controversial, but remember, it is just my opinion. We have Press Factory, which I understand is considered to be one of the worst stages in this game, but I don't get it. I think this stage is fantastic. Now, I've seen it compared to both Wacky Workbench and Sandopolis Act 2, and I can understand why, that would be a negative thing, because Sandopolis Act 2 and Wacky Workbench are absolute booty cheeks. Not good, hate them both. And this stage here draws inspiration from both of them. But it actually does it well. So okay, Act 1, remember the bouncy ground from Wacky Workbench? I'm just putting the emphasis on the weirdest spots today. Well, the bouncy floors make kind of a comeback, but better. Rather than just always being bouncy and then bouncing you like atop the entire stage, you instead do just a little hop. And it happens intermittently, every 5 seconds. I think 5 seconds, or maybe 5 beats, I don't know. Now, sometimes these bounces can take you up to where you actually need to go, and sometimes these bounces will take you to a platform that leads to a dead end. So if you absolutely want to just speed through this, then you need to know how to time your jumps. And it is incredibly rewarding when you can actually nail this. And there's lots of guidance on the screen to help you through that. For one, what causes the bounces is a giant hydraulic press in the background of the stage. And I've seen enough hydraulic press videos on YouTube to know that I'm gonna smile if I see a hydraulic press. But then on the stage geometry itself are these little red lights which turn green when the hydraulic press is about to press, meaning that you are rewarded for paying attention to both the foreground and background. It's a stage that requires you to actually look at it. That's awesome. And then Act 2 is almost as good. So you blew up the hydraulic press, and now Eggman wants you dead. So he sends a drone out, which is charging up an instant death beam. So you have to find these switches around the stage, which are all on your way. You'll find them easy enough to discharge the death ray. The switches are absolutely abundant and all very, very easy to find, especially when you account for the fact that they glow green. But again, you have to actually pay attention to the background because that is how you can see that the drone is charging. There's also the return of these rotating orb things that we saw in one of the bonus stages in Sonic 3 and would then see in Titanic Monarch. And these did initially mess me up a little bit because it's not like it was in those games where to maneuver around them you had to kind of rotate yourself around them. No, now you just point yourself in the direction you want to go, basically. Which again makes it easier, it's just it took me a minute to figure out that was what you had to do, so I ended up dying a few times. It's a changing of the rules, but it is one that I think there's a defense for it. You could say that it is for the better. I'm pretty much just indifferent to it. There's also these rockets that you get into and make you go pew 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 around the stage, and that's pretty cool. Yes, Press Factory is bringing back things that I didn't like from previous games, but they're making it work. So I really appreciate that. While this is quite a challenging stage, I gotta say, Press Factory is one of the most fun ones in the game. Then there's the music as well. Okay, we gotta talk about the music, because the music is one that a lot of people really don't like for this one. They are both in the chiptune style, with Act 1 sounding a bit more Mega Drive-y than Act 2, which sounds a bit more Sonic 4-y. Now, while again, I would prefer if they would just kind of stick with the more contemporary instrumentation that, say, T-Loops lays down, I will say that Act 1's theme goes hard. It slaps. Act 2, very short, very Sonic 4, eh. Overall though, Press Factory is great. Which brings me to my number 1 pick. The best stage in Sonic Superstars, in my opinion, is Cyberstation. Now, this one does have the freshest aesthetic in the game, up there with Golden Capital. In terms of the basic platforming, it is all large enough for you to get in some of that fun Sonic iconic ball action of the funky variety. I love these little trampoline thingies here that go quack, and the sort of Tesla coil sort of conveyor belt cable thingies. Love the sound design there. That's some analog sci-fi goodness. But then this one pulls some inspiration from, I want to say, Metallic Madness Act 2 from Sonic CD. in that you've got these little rays that transform Sonic and his friends into different things. First things first, you get transformed into a voxel, which is a nice, fun little homage to the days of Sonic games being pixel art. And I know some folks will say, oh, that's so retro, trademark, but I think it's kind of fun. I just think it's fun. I also love how sparkly he is. Although I will admit he reminds me more of those nano block toys that you can get on AliExpress. I've got one in my storage place. It was fun to build, just very difficult. Instructions, very hard. But if I were to overall describe this stage and what makes it special, this stage is like a toy box. As far as Sonic platforming stages go, it's all really solid. This is all really good stuff. But then you have the other transformations, where you can transform into a jellyfish, or a rocket, or a mouse. And these things are just fun little pace breakers that are just quick enough to not detract from the overall Sonic gameplay. Take notes, stupid anti-gravity sections from Egg Fortress. Now, admittedly, these aren't all brilliant. The cat and mouse one is not very well designed, because you've got these sort of vertical pipes that you climb up as the mouse to avoid the cats, but it doesn't really warn you that atop two of these tubes are electric fields. And you have no way of knowing that they're there until you're already headed for them, which isn't fair. That's just bad design. Other than that, I don't really have any complaints about this stage. Also, the boss fight is great. Mechanically speaking, it's pulling a lot of different cues from the sort of Sonic CD Metal Sonic boss fight, and some from Mania as well, in that you get to actually fight this guy. I say this guy because you're really just fighting whoever you want to fight. Whatever your current robot friend is from the battle mode will be the boss you fight, and I think that's an amazing touch. Meaning that I was tickled pink when I got to fight Mecha Sonic Mark 1 again for the first time since... wow, has it been that long? Or you can fight Metal Knuckles, that in itself is really cool. And then just when you think it's over, more of these robots pop out of that animal capsule and you have to fight a giant version of whatever your robot buddy is. This is really, really cool. Also, just the overall theming of this stage as well looks really solid. I love the color choices. I love how certain platforms light up in different colors when you're standing on them. Cyberstation is just a lot of fun. Also, the music by, I think, is it Toriana? I don't know how it's pronounced. Well, it was arranged by Toriana anyway. It was originally composed by Jun Sanoi, but the Jun's version sounds horrible. So they had Toriana... whatever, get off my back. She rearranged it, and it sounds great. It goes hard. Is the loop a little short? Yeah, but on a whole, really enjoyed the track. And there you have it, okay? Best stage in the game, Cyberstation. Worst stage, Golden Capital. And then you got everything in between. Overall, a really strong selection of stages. I hope that in the next game, or the next Sonic Superstars kind of game, the next 2D 2.5, whatever they're gonna actually do game, that they will stick to all original levels, that we won't go, back down the Mania route of having like a mix of old and new, because I absolutely welcome having all new stages. That's how it should always be. That is how these games have thrived, is that freshness. I think something they need to do is kind of move away from bottomless pits a little bit. Even though there's not much of that here, there's still more than I'd like. But I think most importantly, next time, even though I am happy with this selection of levels, I'm hoping they'll go away from some of the more Sonic tropes as well. All those archetypes are out here in full force. I hope we get something even more original next time. But on a whole, for the problems that do exist in Sonic Superstars, which honestly aren't that many, the levels aren't really it. These were all really, really strong. But what do you guys think? How would you rank the stages in Sonic Superstars? Comment below, discuss, and as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to support more like it, be sure to hit subscribe, hit the like button, and in the description below is the link to my Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you can get access to my Pup Pictures Diaries, where you can learn a little more about upcoming fan projects I'm working on, as well as getting your name in the credits like these generous people. A special shout out goes to the patrons in the $10 tier. Their names are Glad Goku, Dare Denny, Kale Bennett, That Jordo, Ken K of Warheads, Super Hyper Mecha SP Mark II, Spider-Man 2 still a week away, I'm never updating my net. Oh wait, never mind. And then in the $5 tier we have KLX, Richard Rogers, SSS06, Dazzle Fizzle, and Vera Wild. Thank you good folks all so much for your generosity, and as for those of you at home, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. The video is over. You may leave.